Welcome back to the Social Seller Podcast with Conor Paulsen, where we interview the world's highest quality communicators, professionals, business owners, creatives, and everything in between. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're a high quality communicator, there's a good chance you're living a lot happier life, but you're also bringing those opportunities into your life almost like a magnet. My guarantee is that on this show, we only interview people that I, one, look up to, and two, that I know are going to continue to kill the game for years to come, and I want to make sure they're on your radar. But what I've learned is by asking the best questions, we get the best responses, and that's what the highest quality communicators, our social sellers, are all about. Let's hop inside to the Social Seller Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Social Seller Podcast with Conor Paulsen. Today, we don't even need really too much of an intro because we have someone very influential in my life, someone that helped me, and we were introduced, John Paul Engel, in college, and we've continued our relationship. You're a professor, you've had incredible success in your career as a consultant and just learning to network and influence in so many different areas, industries, avenues. And I see that so much of it is based on, Bob Burg's philosophies of being a go-giver. And you come from such a giving place, which tells me as an aspiring leader that you're coming from abundance and you see abundance, right? And I'm excited to have you here, John. And what brought you here? I'd love to kind of hop into your story. And you grew up in the state of Iowa, but on the opposite side of the state. So could you tell us a little bit about, what that upbringing was like and how it set you up for how you're helping entrepreneurs now?
Yeah, 100%. I have to attribute everything to my mom and dad. I have a really interesting origin story. I was born with brain damage, and I was born addicted to drugs. I was never supposed to walk or lead a normal life. I flunked kindergarten, right? So I don't care where you're coming from. You have the ability to build the life you want to build. You just have to believe in yourself. So when I was growing up, my parents constantly reinforced giving and believing in yourself. We took care of 104 foster kids when I was growing up. So my mother, yeah, 104.
Wow.
And my mother never turned anyone away. So we had in addition to the 104, we had random people living with us. So people would just come and live with us. It was like a hippie commune if hippies were really Catholic. And so we just had this like really incredible life. And my mother would always tell me, John, never not help someone because you don't have the resources. You'll always find a way. And I live by that philosophy. So I help people all over the world. Just recently, I was going into 2022. I was asked to come up with a program for students in the UK to teach entrepreneurship in the high schools in the UK. I was asked to teach in Haiti, so I'm going to be doing a program online for Haitian entrepreneurs. The State Department just gave me a grant for Uganda, so we're building some modules for the Ugandan entrepreneurs, and of course, I do my masterminds. So I help entrepreneurs all over the world. I've got somebody from Croatia, Newfoundland, uh, uh, all over, and so it's super fun. I love to help people. I love to see how people's lives change just when they're introduced to new ideas or new ways to thinking about things, or sometimes just helping people overcome that approach anxiety that everyone feels. So, I love that this podcast is called The Social Seller. And we were kind of chatting before this started, and I want to tell you a story that I think
Please
really
do.
relates to your philosophy. So, I'd say like, how long was it ago? About 8 years ago, I was helping my best friend build a business from him to 2,000 people, which is really fun. Like, so we're on this like rapid growth curve. And one of the things that he asked me to do is he said, John, I need you to find the best salesperson in cable telecom. The best person that we could send into the C-suite and talk to the CEOs of Comcast and AT&T, and T, and I need you to find the best one. And so I start interviewing these guys. And if you're interviewing this level of salesperson, they're used to selling in the millions of dollars every transaction. We're talking about the top of the top communicators in the world. And how do you thin slice that, right? Like how do you figure out, who's the best? And so I looked at the retired CEOs of the major telecoms, and I found a person who was the retired CEO of one of the top three telecoms in the United States. She was, on the board of Stanford Business School. And as I'm looking through her profile, I see that at some time in her life, she lived in Omaha, Nebraska. So I sent this message. Greetings from 90 miles above Omaha. Send me a few times you have to talk this week. And I just was throwing it out there, and she picked it up. So she sent me a connection request. There's two things about that I want people to think about when they're reaching out to people they don't know. The first thing I did was I made a connection that was relatable to her, and it was funny. Right, so that's just a funny message. Greetings from 90 miles above Omaha. And then I always assume they want to talk to me. So when I'm sending a message to someone, I always just send me a few times you have to talk. I don't say things like I would love to talk to you or anything like that. I think that last line conveys a lot more confidence, right? And if you're not confident in yourself, why should anybody else spend their time with you, right? So I send this message. Then she says yes. We set up a time. And holy shit, I've got to talk to the former CEO of one of the largest telecoms. And so I'm a little bit nervous, I have to admit, right? But we had this beautiful conversation, and she was actually telling me I should write a book about some of the things we were talking about. And I asked her for the two best salespeople that she knew. And so she gave me the two best salespeople she knew. And I was having conversations with them, and one of them said this to me, which I think is really apropos to what we were talking about before. She said, John, the best salespeople in the world don't seem like they're selling to you. And she said, that's what I feel like with you. It's like you're just like you're offering me an opportunity, and that made me feel, obviously that made me feel super good. And then when I shared these two candidates with my friend, he said, how do you know they're the best salespeople in telecom, John? And I said, well, the former CEO of AT&T told me. And I was like, okay. So immediately like established that I had accomplished my mission. And so please don't reach out to her, guys. I don't want her to be overwhelmed. But if you're struggling with finding how to reach somebody, just find that connection. Where is there some kind of common connection in their background, in what they're interested in, or just, I always start with my first line's a hook. Why am I interesting, right? So I used to, when I was recruiting cable executives, I would say, I work with the senior executive team of the fastest growing service provider in cable. Boom. All right. That gives me some authority. I want to talk to you because da 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 da. Right. And I give them very clearly why them. And then I make the ask. And I had incredible success with that. And I think if you follow that format, you'd be surprised. I mean, one in 4, 1 in 3 cold emails people would respond to. And we're talking, I recruited some of the top executives in the world with that cold email.
Wow. Wow. And let's unpack that, because that's beautiful that you share that. And we dabble in the recruitment side, and where you do a very specialized, almost sniper-like approach for recruiting when it's the executives, right? And senior level management, where they're very specific people. They're saying, we want the best, right? Go find it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know. So I love that you did the due diligence, and you mentioned you did your pre-work, right? Before there was even a conversation, you researched this individual. You had a little bit of a strategy, and you figured out in this research, this prep, that she lived in Nebraska. Now, coming from the Midwest, I look for any ties to the Midwest, because I know now that I've traveled enough that usually there's a good likelihood we're just going to communicate and vibe, and there's going to be quicker rapport usually, and maybe a little bit of trust. So I love that you noticed that. Now, what I find there, it's clever, it's slightly humorous, and it's right to the point. I do like that. And we have found, again, our job at Uptown Creation is doing this for professionals, for small, mid, and large companies around the world. So this outreach, I love that you mentioned that. And when we can slightly work in humor, it works like magic. Because what else does that do? It humanizes you. In a place where we're all used to getting spammed with 50 to 100 messages a day or a week from automation, right? And that gets annoying. So when it's personalized like that, and when you start right away with that hook, right? And any piece of content, any kind of message that we're writing, any kind of copy, there should always be a clear hook, story, offer, right? Story meaning, what is the body, right? In this context, it's why you specifically, and you made that personalized to them, so they knew that you were speaking to them. So I want to mention the takeaway points that I witness here as a salesperson, and then that's the magic. And now there's the follow-up, right? Some of the other, John, is it okay if I shoot a couple other ideas out there that seem to be working that I like around this spot? And I'm guessing that a lot of your outreach is also happening on LinkedIn, and you're probably finding some of your information from LinkedIn. Is that right? Because you've been in the recruiting space for a while. You've probably been on LinkedIn years longer than most.
There is no better business tool in the world than LinkedIn.
Why?
Well, partly because people read their own LinkedIn emails. So if you try to reach somebody over the phone, or you try to reach somebody through their normal email, they have gatekeepers. Most people read their own LinkedIn. The other reason is that you have the ability to be seen by other people's networks if you have interesting conversations on LinkedIn. So a good friend of mine is the former head of payments for Google. And I love him. He's a great guy. We often have conversations about business or management or leadership on LinkedIn. And I was talking to the head of product for Stripe. Well, I was exchanging messages the other day with the head of product with Stripe. I'm trying to get a meeting with him. And he said, I see you and Tracy talking all the time. I love Tracy, happy to talk to you. And so people are watching you, even though you don't know they're watching you. And if what you're putting out is quality content that's helpful, right? So I try to I have this important piece of homework I want to give everyone, if I may. One of my mentors told me, John, make everybody you meet laugh or smile. Because people love, if nothing else happens, if you made people laugh and smile, you've established a relationship, right?
Well, and you've created an energy shift. That's the other thing. Because now you've whether it's through Zoom and screen to screen, you've given me some type of energy. Now in the way I view it, like it's a higher vibration, right? So you'll see good salespeople oftentimes are coming with they're coming to any conversation with usually a smile and a little higher energy than what an average person would, because it makes it an easier place for everyone to build rapport, right? Would you agree that's happening?
100%. And in fact, every place I roll into, I mean, it's kind of funny when I start dating somebody, I'll show up with somebody and we'll roll into let's say a Subway, and my energy just jumps. When I go into a place, my energy jumps. I remember I was dating this woman and we had just finished this grueling CrossFit competition. It was 5 workouts in a day. And I was pretty beat. I had almost deadlifted 500 pounds. I was at 455. The next jump was 500. I just couldn't quite clear my knees. So I was beat, right? I was, and we roll into this random subway, and like immediately, boom, my energy jumps. I go in there, we order our food. By the time we left that place, Connor, I was holding some random woman's baby. Like, people just are attracted to high energy, right? And so,
Amen.
it's addicting, because when you roll in with high energy, you get that feedback loop, right? And you just, it's just a pump.
It is. It's
Absolutely
a
love
natural
it.
high for the individual going in with a smile and coming from authentic happiness and energy. But then it also really is just setting yourself up, because you're becoming that magnet. And the other thing, John, that I hear high level executive coaches talking about, the people that are coaching the top 1% of CEOs, and they
Mhm.
talk about framing. And in your verbiage, though, I catch it, right? So framing, in the sense of every doorway we go through, that should be a trigger in the sense of we're entering an environment. Now, there's multiple plays here. One is that study after study has proven when we go into a new environment, a new room, it could be a new wedding venue you're going to with your new girlfriend, and you don't know a single person out of the 100 to 500 people there. The easiest
Yeah.
way to increase that likelihood for yourself, give yourself confidence, but also be a magnet for others, is walk into that room, and as awkward and as it might feel, smile. Just walk in with a smile. Naturally, you're making yourself that much more inviting. But what you're also doing is it's starting to tap into like power posing and things, right?
Yeah.
Stanford and study after study have proven this, right? What is emotion? It's energy in motion. And this high energy and bringing this to the table, honestly, I've learned gives me more confidence, but makes it easier for me. Like you said, it opens these feedback loops where I can get to understand an individual a lot quicker. And then if we have enough time, I know you bring up some vulnerabilities. You and me naturally like to work that into conversation, because maybe from a certain degree, it allows us to accelerate the relationship, right? We can have rapport, a baseline of trust, but showing a little vulnerability. And what does vulnerability look like? John, what's a way that you've kind of let your guard down in a conversation? Because I've seen you do it firsthand with someone at Subway or something that you don't know, and I see how you do it quick in a conversation, and I catch myself and a couple other friends that do it. Why do you do that? Why do you potentially say something that could make you look like maybe you're not uh, as professional, or maybe you're not as good of a CrossFitter? What does that do for you?
For me, it's I want people to. I'm always trying to motivate people, right? So I want my whole like purpose in life is to change the trajectory of people that I interact with. And so I want to show that vulnerability so that people can relate, because everyone is vulnerable. There's not a single person that doesn't have insecurities or weaknesses of some kind, or something that's a barrier to their success. And so I just want them to know, hey, look, if a guy who was born with brain damage, who was never supposed to walk, can do what I've done, like, why can't you can do anything you want to do? Like, whatever it is, right? Um, we all we all face challenges, and it's being persistent and using those challenges as learning tools. And so I try to share my challenges as well as my successes, because then people can say, okay, well, that guy in Iowa is talking to the head of payments for Google and the former CEO of AT&T. Like, why can't I talk to those kinds of people? And I want people to feel that way. I just don't want them to call them and tell them that they came from me. So, I want people to really see they can be the artists of their own life wherever they're coming from. And, I've helped people that had nothing, like literally nothing. I helped a woman who had 10 beehives, a kitchen full of honey, and no sales. 3 years later, we had 15 tons of honey. We're making cosmetics, and we're selling into the largest retailer in France called Carrefour from Uganda. Right? So, like, absolutely change somebody's picture just by helping them believe that there's a different life available to them. I remember I was driving with this woman and I was talking to her and I turned to her and I said, someday you're going to be in vogue. And I believed it so strongly that she believes it, and she's going to be in vogue. Like the way she's going, she's going to be in vogue. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. That is such a good reminder, and I'm glad you share that, because it is such a wake-up call. And the little bit of travel that I've been able to do outside of the US, it's a wake-up call that, whoa, there's a lot of these people that have a lot less. And it helped me reevaluate what my baseline for happiness was. And it opened up my capacity to feel more, because you can see the other side. And what I love is you're taking the next step and not maybe just being philanthropic. You're coming from such a loving place and knowing who you are and embracing your goofy self, like you and me. And what I appreciate about you, John, is that I'm sure that any of your close friends and former students today that have gotten to know you well, I can't think of anyone. If I was going to introduce you to someone you don't know yet, and we're talking, and I'm like, oh yeah, John Paul Engel. So I can't go, he's like this guy and this guy, or this person and this person, right? And I think that's a beauty, right? That's a beauty in life. I used to always want to fit in, and that's what I strive for now, because to me, that's like, those are the people that are genuinely happy, that can walk in a room and it's a magnet, because they're genuinely happy. They're not putting on a face, and that's a big component here. We're not doing this because we read it in a psychology book. No, once you start practicing these things, you start to feel this fulfillment thing, right? There's happiness, but then there's this next level of fulfillment. And that's a lot of what you're tapping into, because it's one thing to earn and create for ourselves, but when we're doing it for others, it opens up that fulfillment where it's long-term happiness, and that magnet for life and opportunity and incredible people just gets stronger and stronger. You have been fortunate, John, to connect and work around such influential people. And I mean it like very high level executives. And it still surprises me. Last month, I was on a call with a professional that you had connected with. And it looks like we're going to be able to do some work together in the new year. And I was like, hey, how do you know John? And she laughed, and I was like, oh, perfect. It's going to be another John story. Like John's, it's like that Subway story, right? Like it wouldn't surprise me if I'm on a random call in 2 years and we find out, oh yeah, I know John. I met him in a Subway. He was holding my baby, right? And I'll be like, yeah, we had this on a conversation. When you're around these individuals, you've been around a lot of success. And I remember the stories about Blue Bunny and how that started in Iowa, the globally renowned, ice cream company, to these entrepreneurs and companies that maybe we've heard of the brand, but the entrepreneurs and the decision makers behind it that have kind of made it happen. Can you think of one or two entrepreneurs, men or women, that have been pivotal parts in either creating companies or companies that we might know of, and what helped them get there that you were able to experience firsthand around these individuals where we wouldn't necessarily know them? Could you tell us a story like that?
Oh, absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is the man that invented selling insurance on the internet. So his name's Alan Bauer. And Alan, I had the opportunity to go work for Alan. My summer internship, this was when I was at the University of Chicago. My summer internship at the University of Chicago, actually one of three that I did, because I was an overachiever. Most people do one internship. I did three. And one of them was helping Progressive start selling insurance on the internet. So I got to meet Alan Bauer, and Alan Bauer asked me to identify why Progressive Insurance was a successful company, look at entering Canada and Mexico and France, and figure out how to sell insurance on the internet. And he had a fourth one, which was like figure out what metrics they needed to follow to be successful on the internet. I was supposed to do those four things in 10 weeks. and so I did all of them but the metrics. The metrics thing I kind of phoned in. Everything else I did. And it was incredible. I even invented a program that monitored websites. So this guy, Alan, one of the things that he told me that I have burned in my head is he said, John, if you want to if you want to lead an extraordinary life, you first have to have extraordinary expectations for yourself. So when I had kind of like, I was a little bit worried I was going to complete all my things. And he said, you got to have big expectations. If you don't have big expectations, you'll never do something big, right? And so he was looking for the next growth engine for Progressive. And it turns out that selling online was a damn good way to sell insurance. So he built, God, I don't even know how many billions, but he ended up becoming the head of direct for all of Progressive. And when I was going around talking to the heads of Progressive, all the senior leadership of the company, I got to sit down with the billionaire. So I'm sitting across from the guy that started Progressive Insurance. And it was an idea that he had when he was a student at Princeton. And he thought, you know, everybody should be able to have insurance at the right price. And so at that time, there were a bunch of people who couldn't have insurance, like famous people, people who were high risk. Basically, the entire insurance industry was running away from the high risk people. And Peter said, I'll take you, just pay me, you know, like you just got to pay me enough money to make it worthwhile for me. And so I was sitting across from Peter, just like we're sitting across from each other now, except that we were a little closer in distance. It was like 4 feet instead of, you know, thousands of miles. But I'm talking to Peter, and I asked him, you know, how did you build this successful company? And he looked at me and he said, John, most companies have one CEO. He goes, Progressive has 50 CEOs. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I made sure, and I had to battle for this, but I helped us develop profitability on a monthly basis. So we know the profitability down to the market manager's level on a monthly basis, and we publish that. So I give the authority to each of my market managers to make decisions. They're held accountable for it, and it's made public.
Wow. And
they're ranked ordered. And so these people are aggressive people. Everybody wants to be at the top of the list. You make more money at the top of the list. If you're at the bottom of the list, you're probably going on to something else in your career. So this was the culture he created. And he goes, John, instead of me trying to think of things, I've got 50 people trying to think about how we can be as successful as possible. And he goes, you will be surprised at what comes out of that. All right, I want to tell you about another guy real quick, if I may.
Yeah, please do. I love these. I'm learning a ton.
This guy was one of my professors at the University of Chicago. So I'm at the University of Chicago. It's my first days at Booth. You know, I'm surrounded by the smartest students in the world. It's a very competitive environment, and I'm doing my best to hold my own. My professor comes to me and he says, John, I want to take you to lunch. And he hadn't asked anybody else to lunch. So I'm like, okay. And so I'm thinking, you know, maybe I'm not working hard enough in class, or maybe I'm being annoying because I'm talking too much. Like, I don't really know what this is about.
Problem too.
So I looked this guy up, and he was one of the 4 founders of Anderson Strategic Services, which became Accenture.
Wow.
So this guy was one of the 4 founders of one of the largest consulting firms in the world. They have 185,000 consultants, and he wants to go to lunch with me. And so I'm going to lunch with him. I meet him for lunch at the law school, because the law school has the best cafeteria on campus, of course. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him, and he's asking me questions. I thought he would be talking about his career, but the whole time he was asking me questions. And I had mentioned I had started this group called the Competitive Intelligence Club. And he goes, have you ever heard of, I can't remember exactly the man's name. I think it was Kurt Solomon. Can't remember his name exactly, but he was one of the top two people in competitive intelligence in the United States. He goes, have you ever heard of this guy? And I said, yeah, of course. He's one of the top two people in the industry. And Pete goes, well, I gave him his first job. I think I can have him come speak to your student group. So my first speaker was the most, like, one of the two most respected guys in the entire industry. And I turned to Pete and I said, like, why? Like, Pete, why, why are you asking all these questions about me? Why are you helping me? And he goes, John, that's how I build my business. That's what I've done my entire career. Right? So Pete really instilled in me the idea of being of service to whoever's sitting across from you. That person might be, a 25, 26-year-old kid wet behind the ears trying to make his way in the world, coming from Iowa, now in the big leagues. And, you just do something that makes a little bit of a change and it can change his trajectory. Ultimately, Pete gave me, like, Pete is my model. Pete was to me what I am to you, and that's why I do what I do. Is I was lucky to have these people in my life and teach me how to do the business of consulting. And there was no better person to learn from than from Pete.
Wow. I've never known that story. I didn't know that story about Pete. That there's so many takeaways there. Again, goes back to the go-giver principle and just coming from a giving heart and a loving place, and good things happen, and that we have more than enough time if we really care about things. And I catch myself, thinking that I'm busy or that I am prioritizing things. And I love that you mentioned this. And someone that could arguably be one of the busiest people or professionals in the world, at this time, but that he would take you out and seeing that you were putting work in, right? And bringing people together. And that's something you've always done. Would you say that was Pete a large part of why you became a professor? You have success in your career, you start making money, and then to go back to teaching, I know there's some money there, but was Pete a part of that process for you or influence?
Oh, nobody's teaching for money, man. if they are, they're misguided. so people are teaching for a larger purpose, and I certainly had some huge opportunity costs teaching. Definitely a huge part of it was Pete. Some of my other mentors. Pete was my model as a teacher. My mother played an enormous impact on my decision. The reason that kind of how I started teaching actually was my mother died, and I was suffering from the depression that was associated with that because she was my biggest cheerleader, right? So my mother dies, and I feel this light leaving the world, and I thought, I owe it to the world to share some of her light. I've got to figure out a way to do that. And so I started volunteering in an 8th grade class in Sioux City, Iowa. Now you can imagine, like, it was a relatively unusual thing for a guy like me to roll into an 8th grade class. We ended up creating a book as part of this class with people who graduated from Harvard, Stanford, Oxford. I ended up getting all of these guys who were, my friends from around the world that were top executives to give advice to these 8th graders I was working with. And the kids loved it. We turned it into a book. We gave it away for free. So this was my first kind of introduction to teaching was, 15 years ago, was officially teaching, right? Was volunteering in this 8th grade class. And I went from, teaching 8th grade kids to coaching immigrants in soccer. So I had these kids who were first generation immigrants. The school was allowing them to play soccer if they could fail two classes. So I listened to the kids and they said, they were planning like which two classes they're going to fail. Like, I'm going to fail biology and chemistry. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, if you're not getting above a C in a class, you're not stepping on the field. And they're like, how can you make that rule? And I'm like, well, it's because I care about you, man. And so then I was coaching these kids, and we ended up like coming very close to beating the best soccer teams in the United States. So we had a bunch of immigrant kids who'd never played organized soccer. They didn't have access to the clinics. They didn't even own their own soccer balls. And we tied Omaha South, which was the 16th team in the country, and we lost to Creighton Prep 5-4. And so I did that for a while. And then one of my friends, I was on the board of the Employment Council of Iowa. One of my friends that was the chair of that organization said, hey, John, there's this thing about teaching entrepreneurs. You should apply. And so then I started teaching entrepreneurs in Iowa. And like that was really my jam, because then I was able to take all of these experiences that I had and my global network and take people to like different places. So I had this class that I called the Company Factory. It was advanced business plan. It was called the Company Factory. And about 1/3 of my students started businesses, and like substantial businesses. One of the best videographers in the country today is one of my former students. And he did Beast Mode with Marshawn Lynch. Facebook brought him in to pitch an ad. This kid is just phenomenal. But, he told me that before he took my class, he was going to drop out of school. And I couldn't actually get him to do the homework when he was in my class. So he comes to me later and he says, John, can I do the homework? And I said, sure, man. And so we actually did the class after he got the credit for the class, which then set him up in his business. And he's now one of the best videographers in San Francisco today. But there's a lot of businesses just came out of this class. I took one student from $15,000 a year. She had 5 jobs at the time when she took my class. She made $15,000 a year with her business. She's making over $7 million a year today with her business.
Wow. What type of business?
She's a millwright. So she fixes the machines in companies. And when she came to me, her business was 911 millwright, right? And so, like, what's 911 millwright? She's like, well, when a machine breaks down in a factory, they call me, and I go there and I fix it. And I said, okay. And she goes, people usually call me about 3 a.m. And I'm like, okay, Aaron, people call you at 3 a.m? She goes, yeah. And I go, can you ever get to the factory fast enough for your client to be happy? She said, no, John, like they're losing massive amounts of money every minute the machine doesn't work. I'm like, okay. So your clients are never happy, you can't get there fast enough, and you're not making very much money. Maybe we should think about repositioning your business. So I said, when do you make the most money, Aaron? And she said, well, when the factory shuts down and we can do several machines at once. I'm like, Aaron, that sounds awesome. And actually, that's a great corollary to almost any business. So I said, okay, let's reposition the business to try to get that work. And she calls me up 6 months after the class, and she's like, John, we're making way more money than we ever had before. And then 18 months later, she calls me up and she goes, John, I need $500,000. I'm like, cool, Aaron, are you buying a house? Like, like I don't have $500,000 just laying around. She goes, no, I need $500,000 to get a $7 million contract. I'm like, cool, we'll make that happen. So I put her in touch with some of my friends, and I think it was Warren Buffett's son-in-law actually offered to give her $500,000. So her local bank, who had said no to her earlier, offered a credit line to $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was awesome. And it's, this zone of helping entrepreneurs is really a great zone for me, because I'm really challenged with doing my expense report or like paperwork, any kind of routine paperwork I'm horrible at it. But if you come to me with like a business problem, like last night somebody texted me and said, John, your class was the best class ever. I'm selling real estate to Chinese people in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm like, cool, tell me about that. And then pretty soon, like before I got off the phone, I had a whole portfolio of ways for them to make money in addition to just the straight commission.
Wow. Wow.
Just think about the chain of activities, right? So often there's a chain of activities associated with what your clients are doing. And if you can sell them solutions along the chain, right? So the easiest sale is sale to people that already know, like, and trust you, right? So every business has to take every customer down 3 levels. They have to know you exist to buy from you, right? So visibility. They have to believe that you can do what you say you can do. So that's credibility. Ultimately, nobody's giving you money unless they trust they're going to get more money back than they're giving you, right? Value, right? Visibility, credibility, trust. So if you're already selling to somebody, they trust you. So if you're in that trust zone, the fastest way to grow your business is to look a little bit to the left, look a little bit to the right. What else can I sell these people? Like, what else do they need? What other problem can I solve, right? And so that's a super fast way to grow your business. And that's just one of the techniques I use when I'm helping somebody is I think about, first, are you positioning yourself for the most profitable pieces of business, right? And then what else can you sell to that existing group of people that already trust you that can increase your income? And sometimes you can do that without actually doing a whole lot more work. I remember once I was working with this magazine. I had this magazine. She was about to go bankrupt. So I meet this woman. She's like, I want to sell my magazine. I'm like, I'm like, dollar signs. I'm thinking, cool, selling a business, a magazine, I'm going to make a lot of money. Like, I started talking to her about the business, and she's like, yeah, I'm almost out of money. I need to sell my business. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. So first we got to make some money. And so we did. And what was super fun about it was this was a world music magazine, right? So it was World Music Magazine. It's right at the time Napster comes out. So MP3s are out there. Record companies are losing their minds. They're thinking, we're never going to make money from music again. This Napster dude, Sean Parker, is giving away all our wealth, right? And so what do? They start cutting expenses. So they cut niche advertising. So this woman went from having this great magazine in New York with advertising from all the major record companies to zero revenue almost overnight. So we had to figure out a way to make money. So it's a world music magazine. And I asked her, who are your customers? And she says, baby boomers. Now, you and I know baby boomers are not a target market. They're a generation. Like, that doesn't help me at all. Right? And so, like, I need to aim here, man. Like, I got no advertising dollars. Like, I need to understand better who we're actually trying to serve. So, like, who reads magazines? Educated people, right? Who's going to spend $54 for a magazine? People that have money, right? Who's going to want to read about a world music magazine? People who are involved in international business, right? So I happen to have played on a softball team when I lived in DC, and we played in the league with the embassies. So I knew that there were these guys at embassies called commercial officers. And commercial officers' job is to promote the culture and business of their country. And music is both culture and business. So I'm like, cool, let's call up those guys. And we called up them, and they gave us $30,000 a month to sponsor an issue, and it just totally changed the game. And then we started, I remember there was this guy Sven, right? So we called it Sven. We convinced Sven to do this, and then we're like, hey Sven, like, wouldn't it be cool to have a launch party at your embassy? He's like, yes, that would be great. So Sven organizes a launch party for us. And we're like, hey Sven, like, don't you think there would be other businesses that you work with that would want to advertise in the magazine? Because remember, we have no advertisers, and so you can't really publish a magazine with no advertisers. So he's like, yes, John, like, I'll call them, and then I'll send you over a list so that you know who to call. He did your work. So he totally teed it up for me. And, so we go to the embassy, we have this launch party. Now, who do commercial officers at embassies invite to their parties? Other commercial officers from other embassies. So we're there, we got the placard with the magazine on it, right? We brought the band over from his country, so the band's playing. The ambassador is like thrilled because this is the coolest embassy party he's ever been to. So he gets up and he says, this is the coolest embassy party we've ever thrown. Like, it's all because of Sven. Sven comes up, Sven's like thrilled. All the other commercial officers in the audience are like jealous, right? They're like, I want my ambassador to treat me like Sven's ambassador treats him. So they go up to Sven, they're like, how did you do this? He goes, let me introduce you to John and Fleet and Alicia. So we meet all these guys, and it was like, dude, we had customers down the street, right? And it was awesome. And so, and if you think about it, like, Sven sold for us. Like, how can you arrange things so people will promote you? Like, isn't that cool?
I love that firsthand. And you didn't sell. You brought people together and had a good time. And that alone created that energy shift, that same thing that we were talking about earlier in the conversation about when you first meet someone, how we can bring the energy up. Doing that around others just magnifies it, right? And John, I don't know if I told you, but we're a B2B sales development company, not an event planning company. But in Q3, we threw our first live event in Dallas. And we were like, you know what? The primary reason is we want to get our internal team together because we're all, 14 full-timers scattered throughout the US. We had 20 people that we didn't know show up. We don't really have tight circles in Dallas. And we flew in, had some people, bought everyone some beers, rented out a brewery. Not a sale came in. Met some cool people, got some pictures. Awesome. Well, Q4 came, and about a month and a half ago, we threw an event in San Diego. Now, I've lived here for 4 years, and we wanted to apply the same principles of social selling, right? Not being salesy, just bringing good people together and creating if we can bring good people together, something magical happens for everyone, right? But a part of social selling for this event was we said, we're not going to sell anything before the event. We're not going to sell anything during the event, and we're not going to sell anything after the event. Guess what happened, John? We had 120 people RSVP, 70 to 80 people show up. We provided the name tags, rented out a cool venue, was able to work out a deal because the restaurant was newly open and didn't have a marketing budget for their first year. So we were able to work out a better deal because we'd share content, got a couple DJs that had access to the equipment. They just wanted to be included in the content, right? So I'm saying these things, it's very, very cost effective, lean.
Right.
We had 60 to 70 people show up, not selling pre, during, or after. And we brought in anywhere from 10 to 15 sales. So, 50 to 100K plus in future business that was all, signing contract within 1 to 2 weeks. Now, the big takeaway here is that we didn't sell. We didn't go on stage and, it wasn't like an event. We want everyone rushing to the back table to start signing up. And it's so similar to what you did with an embassy party, right? There's something magical about bringing people together. And I think that's another focal point here with the level of influence you've been able to build, is also bringing people together. That's a big component of why you've been an effective salesperson, business owner, professor, mentor. recruiter, right? Because you know how to do this, and then you know how to communicate it, and you have the confidence in yourself to know that you can help these individuals. And then the thing that we're not talking about is, I'm sure you have grown this layer or two of Teflon skin throughout your life, and realizing not everyone's going to be as receptive, and that's completely fine, right? That's what we call good drop off. You probably wouldn't want to be on a call with them anyway. That fit wasn't supposed to be right. The universe or the gods didn't want you to necessarily, chat with them, and maybe it's just right now. John, I'm really excited because you're always working on 5 to 10 different projects, and they're all exciting. What project are you the most excited about right now going into the new year?
I would like to say my own business, but I'm actually more excited about one of my mastermind's businesses. So I'm very excited about my own business. My own business, we're going to protect people from identity theft. But I came across this woman from Croatia, right? And so I came across this woman from Croatia who made a bet 10 years ago. And the bet that she made was that computing was going to go to the cloud, which was a big bet 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, people were concerned about their data, right? But they chose to go for the cloud. So she chose the cloud. The next thing she did is she looked at the way people worked, and she said, everything's going to go digital and be automated. That we're going to automate more and more of the way the tasks that people make and do. I want to automate as many of those as I possibly can. And then the third piece was work is going social. So companies are going to start operating in a more fragmented way, where people are working across organizations instead of just in a single organization. So she built this platform on an Oracle database that does all of these things. And she can provide, typically when you think about an Oracle or an SAP instance, it's millions of dollars for people to install those in their companies. And only companies of a certain size can have that kind of automation in their processes and systems. She built this so that a company of 50 can automate all of their processes. So, for example, she took a purchasing department at a shipyard from 4 people to 1 person, just because of the efficiency gains of automating processes. So she was focused, like her sales and her approach was, she was going after nonprofits and shipyards. And when I met her, I looked at this and I'm like, oh my God, it's not shipyards, it's not nonprofits. This is tailor made for people who are in the business of scaling companies, because I can take this system and I can scale from 50 to 100,000 employees without any additional cost. And if my business, unless it's a software development business, if my business uses this system, I don't need an IT department because it's on the cloud. I don't need to buy servers. I don't need to have programmers. I don't need a CTO. I've got an entire digital infrastructure built on ISO 9000 principles, so optimized processes that are compliant in every market. So it's global, it's scalable, it's compliant, and it's the most efficient processes possible, refined over 10 years. I've got this system that I can sell to VC investors. And I want you to think about this for a second, Conor. If I'm a VC investor and I've got 10 different companies that I'm working with, how cool would it be for me to come in the morning, log in to my dashboard, see all 10 of my companies, see any problem that's happening in one of those companies, and drill down? And I can track every dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out in real time. So it's like Peter Lewis had, right? It's like real-time profitability and accountability, and it's right there at their fingertips. This is an incredibly powerful tool. I think it's going to let investors that use it scale more companies faster. And if a large company wants to buy one of these smaller companies, all of their processes and systems will integrate more easily into the large company because they have all the data and they're following the same processes and systems as large companies. So it'll be easier to sell it to a larger company. It's auditable, auditable. And basically, we can bring in PricewaterhouseCoopers. So we can bring in the accountants, the CPAs, and it's all there. It's all digital, right? And so we've got complete visibility into how the business is operating in real time, and we can do that for every one of their companies on one system. So they don't have to pay for an IT department. They can share resources across their companies. So maybe instead of having 10 marketing departments, they could have one marketing department serving all 10 of the companies. They can have other service providers just log in. And the cool thing is that this is set up like, a social network that we're familiar with. It's set up like LinkedIn. So imagine you could log into LinkedIn, and I know that you have multiple businesses that you work with. If every one of your businesses was on a single platform that you could see in everything that was going on. Super powerful.
Wow. Yeah, that is very powerful. And in the next couple of years, we'll definitely be in a place where that'll be.
Yeah, and think about this.
More interesting to start testing.
All I need to do, Connor, it goes back to that social selling. All I need to do is I need to get into one company that's funded so that they're showing it to their investor, or I need to get one VC to do it. Because typically, investors don't invest just as a single investor, they invest as a group. So if we set this up in a company, right, then the other investors are going to want to have access. They don't want just one investor to have the access. So we're going to give access to all of them. Then they're going to be looking at this one company and they're like, why don't I have this for all of my portfolio?
Yeah.
Right. So this thing, it's a lot like what we did with Agilist. It's going to be like a fungus, man. It sounds bad, but literally, like with Agilist, we were like a fungus. We got into a call center, and then pretty soon we're everywhere in the call center solving problems. We're going to get in with an investor, and pretty soon we're going to be in a group of investors, and then all of those investors have groups they're part of, and it's just going to spread because the power of the tool is something that all of these guys would love to have. It's one of their biggest challenges, right? So a lot of people don't know this, but 9 out of 10 Series A companies fail. So these are companies that have received millions of dollars and they fail. Why do they fail? Poor systems, lack of oversight, getting into financial problems. What if their investors had better controls so they could really understand what was happening? And you could give them preempt, like we can design, for example, she was talking about this. She's been working with shipyards. So if they have a ship at sea that hits a storm and it's going to be delayed, they send a message and say, hey, we're going to be 2 days later than we thought with this shipment of steel. Well, now instead of waiting for them to not show up on the dock, you've actually got a message that says this person's not going to arrive on time. Maybe you can look for other sources, right? Or you could reorganize what you're going to do. So it has these automation kickers that kick in that warn you of bottlenecks, and they give you the visibility into your existing bottlenecks. This thing is going to be, in fact, the other day I was talking to a guy in London, had never met him before, cold outreach to this guy, pitched him this, and he's like, John, I have 1,000 entrepreneurs. I'm gonna push this out to 1,000 entrepreneurs. Like from a complete cold call to that in one Zoom meeting. Yeah, so I'm super excited about this, but the potential. And the funny thing is, if she had maintained her focus, Like she was seeing it as this tool for shipyards or this tool for nonprofits. If she hadn't realized who really needs what she built and who could benefit the most from it, she wouldn't be positioned like this. So even though she had this great system, she was she wasn't positioned to approach the right people with it. And that's one of the key things in business is you have to figure out, like, ultimately who's going to value what I do the most, right? Because as a small company, you can't serve everybody. The biggest mistake I see people doing all the time was, my customers are everyone. My customers are baby boomers. My customers are like whatever, like millions of people. I'm like, you can't serve millions of people. Let's boil this down to like, who's going to pay the most for what it is that you do? And let's make sure that we reach those people efficiently and effectively with the solution that actually is their biggest frustration.
Yeah. And John, what's the timeline to launch, and where can people find more information?
So this product exists. So it is already launched. It's already launched. It's already helping people. I think it's like 600,000 man hours they've already tracked. I have the metrics somewhere, but it's already helping companies. So we're ready. We can set somebody up
What websites
tomorrow.
would people go to view that?
I would have people come to me. So I
Okay,
want to
we do that.
encourage people to come to me because I can help navigate for you. So um, come to my LinkedIn. In fact, I want to make this offer to every one of your listeners. I have 14,000 connections on LinkedIn, including board members to Fortune 500 companies. Connect to me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to immediately turbocharge your reach. So just by connecting on me to LinkedIn, you're going to have 14,000, including 450 CEOs, 1,100 directors, 1,000 VPs. Those people additions to at the second degree of your network. So um, you know, come to John Paul Engel on LinkedIn. You can actually find me everywhere as John Paul Engel. That's why I use my middle name. It makes it easier for me to be found. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I promise you'll have more connections, and I promise you that you're going to get every day some motivation and some useful content because that's what I'm all about.
Thank you, John. And that's what the social seller community is about, coming from a loving, giving place and abundance. And that is definitely the focal point and the anchor point today in our conversation, our friendship. Thank you for everything you've done for the University of Iowa, the JPEG program, John Papa John, the students you teach, for the people you're helping that I haven't met yet today, to the underprivileged potentially, or maybe doesn't have as much opportunity, to the people that do and just want to be able to help more people. We appreciate you, John. And we'll see you on the inside.
Yeah, thank you for being on the social side. Have a beautiful day.
You too. This is a good one, man. Thank you.